There. Huh? It's one of C. Yeah, so it's
More.
I thought it was a joke, and in all honesty, I forgot about it until that person reached out to me. So it's on you.
Okay, as we're waiting for Tiffany to get back, at the end of chapter 7, Jack and Ralph go hunting for the beast. But remember, then it got dark. This is a common theme. It says they go up the mountain, they run into whatever that thing is, and how do they react? Yes, well said. And they take off. They drop their sticks and run. Remember, they've been marooned on the island alone for over a year now. They're not in their right mind anyway. They're terrified. They see this thing in the dark, and they run off. And they say, oh, we found the beast. All right. Then it starts to break up a little bit. What does Simon witness? What does Simon witness? What does he bear witness to? Yes, absolutely. Very good. So, the hunters have their hunt, and it's described in very sexually explicit terminology. On page 135, you see this powerfully sexually evocative image of the sow being murdered. It's not hunting. It's not just hunting this thing for food or even for sport, but rather it devolves into this savage, sexually explicit scene. You got to understand something. The boys on the island, when they were marooned on the island, they were around 11, 12 years old. What's happening to them now? Puberty. Very good. Puberty is hitting, and it is hitting hard, children. So what we have here is a bunch of adolescent, just prepubescent and pubescent boys that are expressing their fledgling sexualities the only way they know how. Hunting. Hunting. And so that's why Golding is showing, using all this sexual imagery to describe this hunting scene. And as you see, of course, Roger penetrates the pig with a spear up the anal cavity on page 136. So there's Roger again expressing his sadism, his kind of cruelty for the sake of cruelty. So let's continue. They offer the pig's head on a stick for what purpose? Why do they put the pig's head on a stick? For the one we don't speak of, for the beast. What do they think it's going to do? Spare them. Outstanding. So what we have here, kids, is we have mankind in his infancy establishing a rudimentary religion in order to try to make sense of his world. There is no difference between this and, okay, so we want to have a good harvest. We want to have a good harvest, so we need to sacrifice a couple of bulls. If we sacrifice a couple of bulls, maybe the gods will bring rain. Maybe the gods will bring rain and we'll have a good harvest. This is a rudimentary religion that mankind is instilling to try to make sense of his world. This is in effect a syllogism, a concept or conceptual framework we ascribe to the universe in order to make sense of the world. So there we have it. Let's put the pig's head on a stick. That'll be the beast's cut. And maybe the beast will stay away. Maybe the beast will be placated or satisfied. All right, let's continue. Simon is watching all this. Pay close attention to this part on page 137. After the hunters leave, Simon comes out of his little hidey hole, and he approaches this thing on a stick. This pig's head on a stick. And this is the crux of the novel, kids. If you haven't been paying attention at all, you need to pay attention to this next part. The half-shut eyes were dim with the infinite cynicism of adult life. They assured Simon that everything was a bad business. I know that. Etc., etc., etc. A gift for the beast. Might not the beast come for it? The head, he thought, appeared to agree with him. Run away, said the head silently. Go back to the others. It was a joke, really. Why should you bother? You were just wrong, that's all. A little headache, something you ate, perhaps. Go back, child, said the head silently. Etc., etc. Even the butterflies deserted the open space where the obscene thing grinned and dripped. Simon lowered his head, carefully keeping his eyes shut, then sheltered them with his hand. There were no shadows under the trees, but everywhere a pearly stillness, so that what was real seemed elusive and without definition. The pile of guts was a black blob of flies that buzzed like a saw. After a while, these flies found Simon. Gorged, they alighted by his runnels of sweat and drank. They tickled under his nostrils and played leapfrog on his thighs. They were black and iridescent green and without number. And in front of Simon, the Lord of the Flies hung on his stick and grinned. At last, Simon gave up and looked back, saw the white teeth and dim eyes, the blood, and his gaze was held by that ancient, inescapable recognition. In Simon's right temple, a pulse began to beat on the brain. It says on page 138, he gave in, and his gaze was held by that ancient, inescapable recognition. Simon looks and sees something ancient and recognizes it. What is it that he sees? The Lord of the Flies hung on his stick and grinned. Yes, he sees the devil. Very good. He is seeing the devil. He sees it, he recognizes it. Thus begins Simon's great dialogue with the Lord of the Flies. Okay? I want you to interpret this on the surface. Why is the pig's head called the Lord of the Flies? On the surface. No symbolic interpretation needed. Physically, without any interpretive, symbolic description. What do we have here? Yes! Yes, it's a pig's head on a stick and it's covered in flies. So that's on the surface. Beneath the surface, we have Simon who represents the Christ. In this one-to-one biblical allegory, we have Simon who represents the Christ is about to begin a theological dialogue with the Lord of the Flies, or Satan. Simon is about to commence speaking with Satan. That is that ancient, inescapable recognition that he has. But we're not done there. This would not be a Nobel Prize winning author if he had just written a one-to-one allegory and we could just say, oh, Romana Clef style. If we just interpret Simon as the Christ and Lord of the Flies as Satan, then that's as deep as we need to go. No, we're going one layer deeper. So let's keep going. Let's skip past all this garbage with the kids and go to page 143. A page and a half, that's all it is. A page and a half is the absolute crux of the novel. You are a silly little boy, said the Lord of the Flies. Just an ignorant, silly little boy. Simon moved his swollen tongue but said nothing. Don't you agree, said the Lord of the Flies. Aren't you just a silly little boy? Simon answered him in the same silent voice. Well then, said the Lord of the Flies, you better run off and play with the others. They think you're batty. You don't want Ralph to think you're batty, do you? You like Ralph a lot, don't you, and Piggy and Jack? Simon's head was tilted slightly up. His eyes could not break away, and the Lord of the Flies hung in space before him. What are you doing out here all alone? Aren't you afraid of me? Simon shook. There's two ways we can interpret that single sentence, that single two-word sentence. What are you doing here all alone? Aren't you afraid of me? Simon shook. Explain. On page 143. The Lord of the Flies asked Simon, "Aren't you afraid of me?" And Simon shakes. What does it mean? What is the two ways we can interpret this?
He shook his head no.
Shook his head no. Very good. What is another way we can interpret it?
He's afraid.
Shook in fear. Outstanding. Good. There isn't anyone to help you, only me, and I am the beast. Simon's mouth labored, brought forth audible words. Pig's head on a stick. Fancy thinking the beast was something you could hunt and kill, said the head. For a moment or two, the forest and all the other dimly appreciated places echoed with the parody of laughter. You knew, didn't you? I'm part of you, close, close, close. I'm the reason why it's no-go, why things are what they are. The laughter shivered again. Come now, said the Lord of the Flies. Get back to the others and we'll forget the whole thing. Simon's head wobbled. His eyes were half closed as though he were imitating the obscene thing on the stick. He knew that one of his times was coming on. The Lord of the Flies was expanding like a balloon. This is ridiculous. You know perfectly well you'll only meet me down there. So don't try to escape. Simon's body was arched and stiff. The Lord of the Flies spoke in the voice of a schoolmaster. This has gone quite far enough, my poor misguided child. Do you think you know better than I do? There was a pause. I'm warning you, I'm going to get angry, do you see? You're not wanted, understand? We're going to have fun on this island, understand? We're going to have fun on this island, so don't try it on, my poor misguided boy. Or else. Simon found he was looking into a vast mouth. There was a blackness within, a blackness that spread. Or else, said the Lord of the Flies, we shall do you. See? Jack and Roger and Maurice and Robert and Bill and Piggy and Ralph, do you see? Simon was inside the mouth. He fell down and lost consciousness. I'm part of you, is what the Lord of the Flies says. This is Golding's conclusion. The crux of the novel is its discussion of the nature of Satan. Its title, which means Beelzebub, which is used interchangeably for Satan in the Bible, is a discussion of the nature of Satan. We find here that Golding, through Simon, assuming that authorial intent is solid, his commentary on Satan is ultimately an atheistic, or at least a non-hyper-theological interpretation of what this means. Rather than an external being, rather than the beast existing externally as a malevolent force within the forest, outside of the human heart, Golding argues, close, 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 I'm part of you. The beast exists within the human heart. Now this is a big piece of information. This could be a very effective piece of information for the boys that Simon discovers. So let's keep going on to the next chapter. Beginning of chapter 9. Simon wakes up. Running the blood, Simon's fit passed him the weariness of sleep. He lay in the mat of creepers while the evening advanced and the cannon continued to play. At last he woke and saw dimly the dark earth close by his cheek. Still he did not move, but lay there, his face sideways on the earth, his eyes looking dully before him. Then he turned over, drew his feet under him, and laid hold of the creepers to pull himself up. When the creepers shook, the flies exploded from the guts with a vicious note and clamped back on again. Simon got to his feet. The light was unearthly. The Lord of the Flies hung on his stick like a black ball. Simon spoke aloud to the clearing. What else is there to do? Nothing replied. Simon turned away from the open space and crawled through the creepers till he was in the dusk of the forest. He walked drearily between the trunks, his face empty of expression, and the blood was dry around his mouth and chin. Only sometimes as he lifted the ropes of creeper aside and chose his direction from the trend of the land, he mouthed words that did not reach the air. Presently the creepers festooned the trees less frequently, and there was a scatter of pearly light from the sky down through the trees. This was the backbone of the island, the slightly higher land that lay beneath the mountain, where the forest was no longer the jungle, etc., etc. Where do you think he's headed? To do what? He's headed right for that place where Jack and Ralph couldn't stand it. That place where Jack and Ralph dropped their sticks, dropped a load in their breeches, and ran as fast as they could. That's exactly where Simon is going. A buffet of wind made him stagger, and he saw that he was out in the open, on rock under a brassy sky. He found his legs were weak, and his tongue gave him pain all the time. When the wind reached the mountaintop, he could see something happen. A flicker of blue stuff against brown clouds. He pushed himself forward, and the wind came again, stronger now, cuffing the forest heads till they ducked and roared. And Simon saw a humped thing suddenly sit up on the top and look down at him. He hid his face and toiled on. The flies had found the figure too. The lifelike movement would scare them all for a moment, so they made a dark cloud round the hedge. Then as the blue material of the parachute collapsed, the corpulent figure would bow forward, sighing, and the flies settled once more. What is Simon seeing here on page 146? The dead pilot hanging in the trees from the parachute. Simon felt his knees smack the rock. He crawled forward, and soon he understood. The tangle of lines showed him the mechanics of disparity. He examined the white nasal bones, the teeth, the colors of corruption. He saw how pitilessly the layers of rubber and canvas held together the poor body that should be rotting away. Then the wind blew again, and the figure lifted, bowed, and breathed foully at him. Simon knelt on all fours and was sick till his stomach was empty. Then he took the lines in his hands. He freed them from the rocks and the figure from the wind's indignity. I love this scene because, Simon comes up on this thing. The wind blows, and the wind blows the reeking stench of this rotten body at Simon. Simon gets down on his hands and knees and vomits till his stomach is empty. Wipes his mouth, shakes it off, gets up, and starts to untangle the figure. You ever seen somebody do that? You ever seen an athlete do that? Go until they can't go anymore, go vomit, jump right back into the game. That's what Simon does right here. He keeps his head about it. Even though his body betrays him, he keeps his wits about it. At last he turned away and looked down at the beaches. The fire by the platform appeared to be out, or at least making no smoke. Further along the beach, beyond the little river and near a great slab of rock, a thin trickle of